my name is Hannah Finch and I am at the Audubon Center bringing you a HappyRadFunTime Challenge in collaboration with Wise Wonders. This month is all about physics and your challenge this week is called Speedy Sled. We're going to try to figure out how can you make your sled go faster. So join me this week on this challenge. We are going to be focusing on two physics topics for this challenge. One is going to be speed, which you've already calculated with Katie from the zoo when you did all of your running and leaping. We're also going to talk about the force of friction. And friction is when you rub two objects together and there's resistance. And it can cause heat. If you're ever cold outside and you rub your hands really fast, you're going to immediately feel that heat from the force of friction. Another great example of friction that you're probably familiar with is when you're running down the sidewalk and you see that perfect piece of ice and you slide, and as soon as you hit the gravel again, you stop. That is friction in action. So once again, friction is when two objects resist when they rub together. And that happens a lot when you're sledding. Now that we know that friction is the resistance of two objects rubbing against each other, we're going to figure out what do you actually want to test. What's going to make your sled speedy? And there's a lot of different things you can test. In my example, I'm going to test the shape of the sled. I have a long sled and a round sled. You can also test different lubricants. And a lubricant is anything that reduces friction. For example, if you've gone skiing and you have to get your skis waxed, that's a lubricant. Or if you've ever touched bacon grease and it makes your hands really slimy, that is a lubricant. So we are going to take a moment for you to think about what are you going to test. Now that you know what you want to test, that is your variable, and that should be the only thing you change during this experiment. Everything else should be constant. As scientists, we want to reduce all the things that are changing so that we know what we're testing is going to give us the most accurate results. What that means is, if I'm going down a hill, I want to make sure I try to stay in the same space. I don't want to take my long sled on a really steep hill and take my round sled on a really flat hill. That totally changes my experiment. So once you've decided on that variable, think about how you can keep everything else constant, and now it's time to come up with your hypothesis. So, in your science journal, you are going to write down the date of your experiment and your hypothesis. And remember, a hypothesis is just a question, it's your prediction. It's the, if this happens, then this is the reaction. So in my example, I've created a science journal where my hypothesis is that long sleds are going to be faster than round sleds. And remember, your hypothesis could be that I think bacon grease is going to make my sled go faster. You can do so many different things in this experiment. Now that you've written your hypothesis, it's time to gather your materials. Of course, you will need a sled or multiple sleds depending on what you are testing. You're going to need something to measure your distance. Remember that speed is an equation that equals distance divided by time. So it's really important to keep distance the same. So you can use a tape measure or a yardstick, anything like that. You're also going to need something to mark your starting point and finish line to make sure that you are really consistent. You're going to need a stopwatch and someone to actually time you because we need that time, like I said. And of course, your science journal where you are recording all of this information. Now, once again, if you look at the science journal, I've written my name, the date, the challenge, which is Speedy Sled, and my hypothesis. I've also written down what my distance was so that I can calculate my speed later on. Now it's time for the best part of the experiment, which is testing it and riding your sled. Now we're going to record all the information you collect. So I've written the name of my challenge and my hypothesis, and I'm going to explain to you why I chose long sleds over round sleds. If we actually take a close look at a long sled, you'll notice that there's few points that actually touch the ground. And remembering that friction is the resistance of two objects rubbing together, this means that I believe a long sled is going to cause less friction because there are less points touching the ground than a round sled that is completely flat on the bottom. Now, in this experiment, I've created two tables. I have labeled those with the runs and the amount of time it took me for each of those runs. That way, I can create an average of my time to calculate my speed. And all of those calculations are right here. You can get an adult to help you or challenge yourself to do it on your own. Now that we've collected all of our data, we can finally make a conclusion and figure out what actually made your sled go faster. Now in this made-up example, I concluded that long sleds are faster than round sleds. I'm excited for one of you to actually test this and let me know which is faster, and for all of you to share, what did you learn? What made your sled go faster? Thank you for joining us in another Happy Rad Fun Time Challenge.